So it's our pleasure to welcome Charlie David to the podcast. Charlie calls himself a storyteller. He's been on TV in the travel series Bump, as well as the paranormal Dante's Cove. His films include Mulligans, A Four-Letter Word, Judas Kiss, and most recently Paternity Leave, some of which have been produced through his production company Border to Border Entertainment. He's also an author and voiceover artist with several titles available from Dreamspinner Press. His novelization of the 2008 film Mulligans is being re-released by Dreamspinner on May 25th. Thanks for being here, Charlie.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to do this.
So, if our research is right, Mulligans marked a few firsts for you. First full-length movie to write and produce, first novelization. But tell us about the story for those who may not be familiar.
Mm-hmm. Well, first off, for those that don't know, a mulligan is a term from golf, and it's essentially used in a more casual game when one player takes a shot and is allowed to take a second stroke, and it doesn't count against that player's score. So it's a do-over. And writing the screenplay and the book for Mulligans really came about after I had done this gothic supernatural soapy show called Dante's Cove, which was a lot of fun. It was very kind of gay in your face in a way.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Best watched drunk is the other way that I, generally caution people if they haven't seen the show. I was throwing fireballs at witches and warlocks, and, people were half dressed most of the time. But it wasn't necessarily the type of programming that I felt comfortable like sharing with my grandparents or even family or people who, I was also recently coming out. So I wanted to start writing and producing content that I felt could further the conversation around what it means to be LGBTQ, that was more accessible to a mainstream audience. And that's why I wrote Mulligans. And I think in many ways on the film front, we did succeed in that. We had networks like HBO and Sundance and other mainstream networks in Canada pick it up. So that brought it kind of beyond the niche of just gay TV. And of course, the gay networks have been extremely supportive as well, which has been good. But, it was a show where, my grandmother invested and watched and,
Invested even, that's awesome.
Well, it was one of these things where I was a first-time producer. I was 27 years old and had done a little bit of TV and film, but had never produced a film before, and nobody likes to bet on a horse that they haven't seen run, sure. Right? So I didn't have broadcast support or distributor support or any kind of pre-sale money. So it was one of these things that you now see a lot of on like Indiegogo and things like this where like, please help me fund my film. Except at that point, I wasn't looking for donations. It was be a part of this, come on board and be an investor and let's take this journey together. And so I flew around Canada and the US giving little dinner parties and pitches about what this story was and why I believed in it. And thankfully enough people came on board to make it happen. And, everybody got paid back and shared in profits. So that felt even better.
Nice. Well done. Congratulations for a first film. That's awesome. What's it like revisiting the story 8 years on as you get ready for the Dreamspinner re-release?
It's really interesting. I mean, that the story for me of Mulligans, it touches a lot of points. A lot of the characters were inspired from friends or family in my own life, which is, I think something that a lot of writers, of course, do. Somebody inspires you in a little thing that they say or the way they hold a teacup or whatever it is, and you kind of, roll from there. So there was a lot of, chuckles and comfort and fond memories of both the filming and the original writing. And the Dreamspinner team, for me, the editing team there, just really helped elevate the level of the book, and I think took my writing and pushed me, encouraged me to to make it better than it was. So I think with this second edition, it's something that I'm proud of, and I'm excited for the story to go back out into the world.
Awesome. So you mentioned that, obviously they did their editing work with you. Was there anything that you went into the revisions knowing you wanted to change or adjust or update?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the film, film is an interesting beast where generally a screenplay is only 80 to maybe 100 pages, right? And on those pages, you have a little bit of description, but it's mostly dialogue and a lot of white space left for the imagination of the director and everybody involved. And while I'm certainly happy with the film, I think that there were some things that, for me as the storyteller, the creator, were left on the editing room floor or weren't explored in the way that, I thought they maybe could be. So some of those things are certainly drawn out more in the novel. So side relationships, as well as chapter by chapter, we switch perspective from one character to the next. So we're going through each of, the members of the family, and then the character of Chase, who is the character who kind of disrupts the family unit. And we see what's going on, their motivations, what they're thinking. And I think that really is helpful. I mean, it's been great, this both the film and the book, the amount of interaction with people who have watched or read after, who have said, "Oh, I love the story. I really like the family, and can we do a sequel?" And so that's something that I certainly consider, although it was probably one of the hardest endings I've ever had to write or come up with. And I think part of that, I should backtrack a little bit. So I mentioned what a Mulligans is in golf. In the term, like in our story, what happens is two college-age best friends go home for the summer holidays, and the friend has an affair with his best friend's father. And so then it's the repercussions of that affair, that kind of falling out. And, and certainly kind of a coming out later in life story, which is, I think, the trigger that most resonated with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In terms of the ending, do you think you accomplished it? For lack of a better word, better, I guess, in the book than the film? Because of what the novel page gives you to spread things out more?
Yeah, I think that's it. Like in the film, I probably had originally written at least 3 or 4 scenes between the parents, discussing where is our relationship now? What does this mean? Are you gay? Am I supposed to have boyfriends? Are you supposed to have boyfriends? Are we still going to live together? Am I taking this house and you're taking the cottage? How do we tell our 10-year-old daughter about this? All this stuff that, a normal relationship would go through, obviously the fireworks, the highs, the lows, the crying, to get to a place of reconciliation that everybody is different, but that could take years, could never happen, a reconciliation. Or, in the case of our story, we tried to build it so that the mother knew, but she wasn't, she didn't want to admit it to herself. It certainly wasn't something that she was putting out there. It was kind of like, I maybe have a husband who's interested in the same sex, but it's not something that, he's he's not out there chasing anything. And so, everything's kind of as good as it gets. And let's just keep the car on the rails, as it were.
Right.
Yeah, so I think in the novel, I was certainly able to expound on all of that and what was going on internally for those characters and how they got to a place of being okay in their own way. And it's not a happily ever after, at least yet. I think, everybody is left with hope and an open road, but I think just by its essence, the story is a very difficult one for me at least, to realistically tie up and put a bow on.
Right. Right. Without, I think the bow would make it feel forced.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So as an author, do you have a preference, or actually better as not just an author, but as a creator, do you have a preference of like writing screenplay versus novel? Or do they just both bring you something different?
Yeah, I think they really bring something different. I love both story forms. You know, I think they're so fun to explore. When I'm writing a screenplay, I'm imagining it as a director, right, or as a producer, and in some ways that becomes more limiting because I'm also quite aware of what budgets are in gay film, and I tend to make things kind of in the queer space. So sometimes that's a little bit limiting because then I start going, oh, that'd be fun, but that's going to cost this much, and then if we do that, or if I want, you know, and so I have to really try and break out of that box because my brain is built as a producer as well, and to turn that off takes some real effort. Whereas in a more creative story form like a novel or a short story or whatever, those limitations are gone. So that's definitely more exciting.
Mm-hmm. And with Mulligans, we should mention too that you also did the audiobook. You voiced the audiobook. So you've really like done every performance method available. You were Chase in the film. What was it like to take this that you'd done as Chase only and then voice and essentially perform the entire work?
Yeah, it was very interesting because I think as a novelist or any storyteller, you would like, I'm sure this resonates with you too, that a little bit of your heart goes into each of the characters, even the ones that you maybe dislike, you know, but you know, there's parts of you in every page. And so it was rewarding. It was really fun. It was emotional to go through scenes like the most explosive one between the parents, you know, to reimagine, you know, Taya Gill playing the role of Stacy, the mother, in that kitchen, you know, talking to her husband for the first time saying, I saw you kiss him, you know, and like, my body gets shivers just as I think of, oh my God, what would that be like to just feel your world start to crumble, you know? And knowing that in that moment you probably have a choice to continue to avert your gaze and go about life or to confront this head on. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was really, really fun to do that. And I generally get a lot of joy in, you know, voicing the work of authors and doing these audiobooks. It's a really fun experience to go along that ride with them, to find the voice of the different characters. And I mean, I'm not like a voice artist in terms of, you know, big cartoon stuff or how some voice artists are really fantastic at putting a bunch of different voices for everybody. I tend to do a little bit of nuanced work, occasional accents, especially if it's obviously written in, then I'll do my best. But I mean, yeah, not every book makes a good audiobook either. And that's something that I think generally as authors, when we're writing, we're not imagining what it's going to sound like as an audiobook, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it becomes very challenging when I look at a page and if it's just dialogue, and it's 6 people at a dinner party, okay, this like, you know, to switch back and forth, even with simple nuances between those people, if they don't have kind of a tag at the end, she said, he, whatever, gestured. And so, yeah, it's, I mean, I'm learning a lot as a writer just by, you know, being able to read other people's work, which is pretty fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You've got 2 other books with Dream Spinner. Boy Mid-Flight, which is an audio, and Shadowlands, an ebook and audio. Tell us a little bit about those.
Boy Mid-Flight is also receiving a re-release with Dream Spinner on July 4th, which I'm excited about. It has a great new cover, and was also broomed and swept and dusted through. So I think, again, it's also a better book than the first edition. Boy Mid-Flight is very much my story as a teenager, I would say. It's a coming out story. And then with some kind of creative, imaginative flourishes moving on from there. But it's about a young guy who's going to a performing arts college in Victoria on Canada's west coast, moves down to the States, and kind of following his search for love along the way. And then Shadowlands is a book of short stories. So it's an anthology of kind of paranormal, queer short stories. So that was really fun and definitely much darker than anything else that I've done. And I think that was maybe the most startling feedback that I've received, is people going like, you wrote that? Like, where did that come from? Because they either know me as the bubbly host of the travel show Bump, constantly smiling and joking and having fun, or, from other acting work, but they've never kind of seen this, kind of dark emo side, which like also exists, So, in ways that was maybe one of my favorite books to write, just because it was so freeing that it's short form. It could be kind of anything. There's prose in there. There's poetry. So yeah, and that one's out on ebook, paperback, and audiobook as well.
That must have been a fun audio to record, going between the prose and the poetry and some of that darker stuff. It
was really fun, although I would say I think it was one of the first audiobooks I ever recorded. And I was in Seattle filming Judas Kiss, this movie that we did a few years ago. And it was on a day between filming, and we booked an audio studio, went in. And so the pressure was on to do almost 200 pages in a day. And
wow. That's ambitious.
That was ambitious. That was very ambitious, and not the way that I like to work. I mean, often when I'm doing an audiobook for somebody, I'll take a month, because I'm reading, I'm planning, and then I lay chapters down. I edit that work, you output, and then there's back and forth with the author or with the publishing house as well, in terms of little tweaks or fixes here and there. So it's a bigger process than a day.
Yeah. And I would imagine just giving voice to 200 pages in a day, having talked to some voiceover artists, it's like there's a point where they need to stop so their voice isn't just drained.
Yeah. No, I think it was one of the most difficult and again, a learning experience, where I would go, that's not happening again. I don't care how tight my schedule is. We're not doing that.
Smart. So what kind of stories attract you as an author and creator to, lend your voice and talent to?
I guess, it kind of depends on the genre in which I'm working. For the past 3 or 4 years, I've really been exploring documentary and loving that. And so all my doc films are up on my website, bordertoborder.ca. And we've just released one called Balls that's all about men's testicular health. So looking at guys who have gone through testicular torsion, which is when they twist and there's a loss of blood flow, testicular cancer, varicocele vein, within the trans community, either M to F or F to M. So that choice to keep the balls, or, right now we don't really have a way to build them for F to M. So how do you have kind of psychic balls? And this whole idea of what does this weird body part mean in terms of masculinity, virility? Why do we imbue it with so much stuff, So that's one. We're doing one on polyamory, which is called Us Plus. So the idea of, living non-monogamous lives and finding new forms of love. We've done mini series on strippers called I'm a Stripper. We've done, lots of different things. And that, working as a director in documentary, has taught me story in a very different way, because documentary is a live animal that has no leash. And you try and, plan as much as possible, but you are following real people and you're trying to anticipate how they will react in any given situation, how they may answer a question, and then following the lead from there. So I found that form very exciting. Mm-hmm. And in the scripted world, we're turning Shadowlands into an episodic mini-series. So we're going to take some of those paranormal queer short stories and shoot it as like probably 5 or 6 episodes of about half an hour. Kind of a throwback to like the Twilight Zone, that type of a feel.
Nice. Are we going to see you all dressed up in a suit introducing each Rod Serling-esque?
That was the thought originally, and we even did like a little teaser in that way with me as like a ringmaster, but then we've decided since to cut that. And so, it's still an homage to that kind of era of that kind of television, but we're going to lose the host and just go directly into the stories, which I think will be stronger.
So as an author, who are your inspirations when you're writing?
Growing up, I guess I read a lot of Anne Rice. I devoured her work. And I think that, I could definitely draw a line from her to Shadowlands and the inspiration there. She's just so descriptive and verbose and like, in the best way, Right now, I'm reading a lot of historical fiction. I love Eric Larson. I think he's like such an amazing talent to take, people's journals and news reports and all these things from over 100 years ago and weave a yarn that is gripping to me today. In the kind of space, I've been enjoying Ella Frank and L.A. Witt. I've been doing some of their audiobooks recently. And they've been, I've certainly enjoyed their work as well. But I almost always have a pile of like 4 or 5 books on my nightstand. And I'm the type of person who will be interswitching.
Oh, wow.
And reading different ones and, depending on kind of my mood for that evening, whether I need to get to bed quickly, so something needs to put me to sleep, or it's a multi-chapter night. Yeah.
So what's the most recent thing you read off that stack? If only for like one bedtime.
Right now I'm actually reading Winter of the World, which is, I would run to get the author's name. Why can't I remember his name?
I could look that up off Amazon. That's the beginning of the internet.
It's one of these, like he writes these like 900 or 1,000 page kind of epic stories. Winter of the World follows probably 10 families kind of leading up to the Second World War. And so we're in Germany, we're in the UK, we're in Ireland, we're in Spain, we're in the US, and again, it's I guess more, it's in that historical fiction land, and World War I, World War II, I'm really enjoying right now, which is maybe a little bit off topic for romance, but
I don't think not necessarily everybody reads all romance all the time.
Yeah, no, true.
When do we get to see more of you as an author with another book at Dreamspinner, perhaps? Anything in the works?
Yeah, I've had a couple that are just, my latest one, working title, Boys of Montgomery, is a It's kind of like a queer Hardy Boys. And I guess that was something that I desired, fantasized about when I was reading those guys growing up. I was like, oh, what if these guys were like, not brothers, but boyfriends? And what if they went around, solving mysteries all over the place? And so I'm about, I would say, probably 3/4 of the way through that. So hopefully in the next 6 months.
I'll definitely push the buy button for that, because that sounds great. I mean, I had the Hardy Boys books growing up, and there was the 70s TV show.
Yeah. This is more. I mean, it's probably for their Harmony Inc. Press. Like it's more YA stuff. Yeah, but something that I wanted to explore. I've just been reflecting recently again on like what is my life mission? What the heck am I doing here? And like, does any of this matter? And those esoteric, weird questions that we sometimes go through. But I keep coming back and always have to this idea that I grew up in small town Saskatchewan, had no gay mentors. There wasn't accessible gay media at that time, and I think that's what has always pushed me to create and will continue to push me to create in this space, whether it's film, TV, or books, is telling our stories, and hopefully telling stories that feel authentic and reflective of who we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I certainly felt that with Mulligans. I mean, there's so much there. I mean, even though it was made, almost a decade ago now, it works as a story of now too, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that was the most rewarding thing when we released the film on the festival circuit at first, because you make something, you have no idea, right? Like whether it's a book or a film or whatever, how people are going to react. Is anybody going to read it? Will your mom read it? Will she tell you it's good? I mean, that's her job, right? But we opened in Toronto with Mulligans, and I remember walking up with my business partner, Linda, and there was this lineup down the sidewalk out of the theater. And I was like, oh my God, I wonder what this is for. Like, could you imagine if our film got, people lining up like this? And sure enough, it was our screening, and that was incredible. And then to sit in that audience and hear people laugh when you hoped they would laugh, cry when you hoped they would cry, and applaud, and then after, for so many, especially I would say, men that were kind of in their 40s, 50s, 60s coming up after and saying, that was my story, or there were certainly elements of my life's journey in there. I was married. I had kids. Mm-hmm. I had to come to terms with the fact that wasn't, that's not who I was. That's not how I was built. And the amazing, beautiful stories. I mean, I told one as best as I could imagine it, right? But the truth is, so many men and women have gone through this journey, and their stories are incredible. With, did they find reconciliation? Did they not? How did they talk to their children? How did they, then approach life in the workplace? I mean, it's coming out is tough. Doesn't matter what age it is and how you're doing it, or whether it's any of the letters in the acronym of our community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a great way to put it. So what's the best way for people to keep up with your work?
I guess, visiting my website, if you want to see the work that's available now, which is border2border.ca. So border, the number 2, and then border.ca. And then, since I'm a video guy, either YouTube or Vimeo. And if you just search for Charlie David, you can, find me there. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook and other social things, but probably YouTube and Vimeo are the ones that I'm most active.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to throw out to our listeners and watchers before we wrap up?
No, just, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for what you do and for your support and encouragement for all of us in the creative community. Really appreciate it,
Yeah.
especially that you get up at 4:30 in the morning to do it.
Well, we're certainly very happy to have you here and wish you all the success with the re-release and the other projects you've got cooking out there.
Thank you so much.